The days are finally longer and the flowers are in full bloom. It must be time for the Washington State Spring Fair. Celebrate the return of warmer days by popping on over to Puyallup the weekend of April 10th to 12th and 17th to 19th. Seek thrills on the festival rides, try your hand at carnival games, see some adorable animals, and, my personal favorite, eat too much funnel cake. You can get your tickets at thefair.com, and kids 5 and under are always free, so you can bring the whole family. This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. We are in a moment of transition here in Seattle. The future of light rail is a bit up in the air, as is the recently passed millionaire's tax. And this week, City Council held a public hearing on the future of the city's growth plan. Here to discuss, we have Ryan Packer, contributing editor at the Urbanist and transportation advocate. Welcome, Ryan.
Happy to be here.
And we have Brett Hamil, writer, performer, and cartoonist behind the weekly series Doom Loop. Hi, Brett.
Good morning.
So Seattle is in the process of enacting its One Seattle Comprehensive Plan for rezoning. So part of that plan was to bring the city up to speed with some state laws requiring upzoning, but the plan is overall an attempt to create more density in our city. Mayor Wilson has pledged to push for even bigger changes. So, of course, this all started before she took office, but the current plan allows for more and taller buildings in areas within half a block of major transit stops. Wilson has called that stingy, but there are still plenty of people who think that that already goes too far. Ryan, I know you've been following this for a long time. This started before Wilson took office. The city's been working on this for years. But how has the game changed now that Katie Wilson is the mayor?
I think it's completely changed. There's a new baseline expectation around density in the city. Heading into this hearing, which has been in the works for months, essentially, Urbanists were prepared to fight for every single block of additional areas where apartments would be allowed in areas of the city that had long been off limits, places like Madrona, Montlake, Tangletown. But now we have the backing of the mayor to go much, much further. And so it feels like we're in a very different place.
Brett, have you noticed anything different in the last few months here in the conversation around Seattle zoning?
Just what Ryan said, you've got the mayor showing up at a pro-density rally right before the hearing for the comp plan. We actually have an advocate in the mayor's office now. So yeah, it is a totally different ballgame. And if there's anything she's committed to, these are the core group of issues that she's going to deliver on, I'm sure.
So Ryan, I know you were covering that public hearing on Monday. What viewpoints were brought forward during the public speaker part of that hearing? And was there anything in particular that stood out to you?
The number one thing that stood out to me was that a majority of the speakers across the morning virtual session and the afternoon in-person session were asking for more housing, more density. We had the normal issues raised that we do at every hearing around we need to preserve our trees and we want to make sure we aren't putting density in the wrong place, which we hear a lot. But ultimately...
What is the wrong place?
It's next to their house.
I see.
There's a big group of homeowners in Laurelhurst who are really concerned about some upzones next to a park and a school at the end of a very frequent bus line, and they think that the density should go on busy Sandpoint Way. That's an example of kind of the opposition that we usually hear at public hearings like this. But I think my takeaway at the end of the day was the game has changed. The NIMBY block in Seattle is on the back foot in a way that they haven't been in decades. Community councils are trying to figure out any way to get a toehold into changes, trying to frame their opposition as pushing for family-sized housing by way of trying to get the status quo maintained.
It's amazing. If you think back to like 2015, Mayor Ed Murray proposed a full portfolio of upzones, and he got hammered so hard by the NIMBYs that he walked it back within a week. He completely removed those from the plan. So now they've got to be in full panic mode, which you love to see. I love to see.
how do we think this plan is going to evolve now that Wilson has called the original baseline stingy? Like, how much further are we going to go, and what are advocates pushing for as a next step?
That's the big question. And so they have to go back and do another environmental review. And what we're asking right now is, what are the bookends on that going to be? And so right now, the upzones around transit are only extending along the block where the transit is, which is what the mayor is calling stingy. The question is, how far away from those bus stops are we going to go? Are we going to go a 10-minute walk? Are we going to go 5 blocks? What are we going to do? And if we can't go any further than what that bookend is. And so if they don't study the full, half mile, then we can't go any further than that until we do a whole separate phase of the project. So it's really important to be broad and considering these options, because we can't go back. Once that's studied, you can't redo it.
Speaking of environmental review, I know a major player in this larger discussion has become Tree Action Seattle. So tell me a little bit about their platform, and what is this that I'm hearing about children singing at the hearing?
So Tree Action Seattle is kind of one of the biggest players in the housing advocacy space right now in Seattle, making the argument that we need to be focusing on tree canopy preservation, primarily focusing on trees on private property and the trees that will be lost to redevelopment. Not really centered in the conversation is, how we add trees in the right of way, how we add trees in parks, how we add trees everywhere in our city. It's kind of a very narrow mindset, in my opinion, in terms of this kind of focus on making sure that developers aren't able to tear down trees, or setting aside the fact that, as urban development is limited, you see more sprawl into the forest lands of King County.
And Seattle already has pretty strict rules around tree removal on private property. So what is it that these folks are pushing for in particular?
They are fighting what they call lot sprawl, which is essentially just
Brett. I see your face here.
Oh
what are your thoughts on this?
Let's just make up some more shit to throw at the wall. Lot sprawl is a fake concept that is purpose built for them to prevent development. So, in fact, just for the heck of it, I heard we might be talking about this. So I Googled lot sprawl, and even Google's AI, summarizer doesn't believe in it in that sense of the word. It describes it as basically what we describe as urban sprawl, which is a whole other thing, which is what urbanists are trying to, fight against, is new development at the edges of existing communities, like in the suburbs, that destroys wildlife and natural settings. So lot sprawl is not a thing. It's completely made up.
Well, to be fair, isn't everything kind of made up? What is the definition they are working with for lot sprawl?
You need to, if you're going to have a detached dwelling or something on your property, you need to have it nice and cozy with the house, because then they can fit more trees around the periphery for all your neighbors who don't own your property to enjoy. It's truly wild. Like, these Tree Action folks, they just love other people's trees. And there have been instances in the past where they tried to block the takedown of trees on other people's property, including one where they claimed that Grandma Lottie or whatever loved this old tree, and it turns out she hated the tree. She hated sweeping and cleaning up after it. The bigger picture is that they've figured out what a lot of reactionary elements in our society have figured out, like Barry Weiss, or the people, the opinion writers at The Atlantic, which is just find areas where liberals are cross-pressured. So, like, liberals agree, we all agree we need more housing. There's not enough housing. Housing's too expensive. But trees are very important too. So they find ways to turn people against the sensible proposition by picking edge cases in which, they're going to cut down this big, beautiful tree that's shaded our community for years. And then within that, they basically are trying to halt all development. And it's just wildly reactionary, but it's the kind of thing that low information liberals will be like, oh, these folks seem like they really care about trees. I guess I'll cast in my lot with them.
I imagine there's some sincerity there, right? Like, people do care about trees. And I think there are lots of folks in Seattle who I agree. Like, I think it puts people in an interesting political position where it's like, do you hate trees? And I don't think anyone here is really going to be like,
No, exactly.
But we also have seen a long history in town of
sorry.
using environmental review or other environmental issues as a way to block projects that people just don't like for whatever reason or don't want in their neighborhood, whether that is the expansion of this upzoning, or we've also seen it a lot with tiny home villages where folks are like, we need to do an environmental review to make sure that this isn't going to harm the trees or the overall environment here.
To me, it's a lot like how people say it's inhumane how these homeless people are living. They shouldn't have to live like that. Agreed. My solution would be to build more housing or find shelter for them. Their solution would be work camps and such. So there's quite a different reaction to the proposition that, we need trees and trees are good.
Wait, but we still haven't gotten to the children singing part. Ryan, can you explain what this was all about?
Yeah, so there was a group of 4 elementary school kids that showed up to the hearing yesterday, I believe with their elementary school teacher, to perform a rehearsed song and dance that was actually titled Lot Sprawl. It's something that sounds good, the idea of requiring that buildings be densely concentrated in the center of a lot. But what it doesn't really account for is flexibility. And when you don't have flexibility when you're talking about home construction, you end up with the status quo. You end up with a lot of projects that can't move forward. And, we have incentives to provide tree retention on lots. And there's been instances where we have redesigned a building project around a tree, completely making sure that it's going to be maintained and limiting the size of a building that's going to go in, and then the tree immediately died.
But if you propose that they remove a parking spot to plant a tree, no one in Tree Action or their associated groups would ever sacrifice parking for trees. I can guarantee you.
There was actually a bill in Olympia that passed that requires the city to remove mandated parking if there's tree retention. And I didn't see these types of advocates coming out to support that bill.
Ooh, well, in this game of chess, maybe that's the next step here to see what the overall trade-offs would be and the general leftist talking points. Seems like it would place people in a interesting position to have to make a decision. So speaking of decisions, what are the next steps with all of this?
At this point, the mayor said she wants to go faster, bolder, denser, quicker with the next phase. So we're hoping to just get this wrapped up as soon as humanly possible and move on to that phase. But hopefully we can get adopted phase 2 before the 4th of July, which I would call kind of quick.
Love the glacial speed of government. Yeah. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about another slow moving but up in the air project, Sound Transit. When I first moved to Seattle, Town Hall was my lifeline to the city. I went to book talks, panels with interesting local thinkers, and even a concert. If you're looking for something fun to do or to learn something new, you'll find something going on nearly every night of the week at Town Hall, with events spanning civics, science, and arts and culture. They're a nonprofit with a mission to amplify ideas, foster discourse, and connect people through events. And what I love most about Town Hall is that their events are produced by and for the community, and I think that really shines through in their programming. Tickets to most of their events are offered on a sliding scale, and if you're under 22, you're in luck. They even have free tickets for you. If you haven't been, they're located in this gorgeous historic building on First Hill. And on Monday, April 13th, the team from NPR's Planet Money podcast is going to be there with media producer and everyone's TikTok crush, Jack Corbett, and Redfin economist Daryl Fairweather to discuss all things economics, from the silly to the sublime. Get tickets and view the full calendar of events at townhallseattle.org. Now that the 2 line has opened, people are hyped about light rail. We're seeing lines of people on opening day waiting to take the train. I mean, still, it's been at least a week and people are still seeing huge crowds on light rail. But the future of ST3, the next phase of our light rail expansion, is also up in the air right now. So to give a little bit of context, Puget Sound voters approved ST3 back in 2016. And back then, the light rail extension that was slated to cost about $54 billion would connect Tacoma, Issaquah, and Everett to Seattle. And as many Seattleites are familiar with, it also included plans to add West Seattle and Ballard stations to the system. But Sound Transit is now facing some cash flow issues. And at last month's board meeting, there were several options presented that could save something like $35 billion overall in this project. Ryan, can you run us through the options that were presented?
Sure. So there was kind of three different approaches. One of those was kind of fake, which is basically, what if we phased every single light rail project? We didn't get to Tacoma Dome. We just got to Fife, which no one really thinks is a feasible option. Didn't get all the way to downtown Everett. Just built a West Seattle line to Delridge, which also would be pretty silly to just build a one station line. And so that's kind of almost an exercise in kind of, what if we did this, what would we get? And the answer is kind of the ability to build parking garages, and that's about it. So the other one is keeping everything that is currently on track. And so that would keep West Seattle moving and defer the Issaquah to Kirkland line, which is much further behind in planning. It's currently set to open in 2044. And so it would kind of put that one on hold. It would advance that into planning, which is already happening. And then the third is kind of looking at the regional connectivity, paying less attention to what's currently in planning, and would trade West Seattle for that Issaquah line.
So it's been a couple weeks since these plans were initially announced. And to my understanding, these options are just a starting point for discussion. It's kind of more likely going to be a mix and match situation, right?
100%. You're kind of you have to wrangle a board of 18 people who represent different parts of the region and get their priorities and kind of understand what they find important and what they don't. And so the way to do that is to present them options and see what they say.
Yeah. I mean, as a result, though, I think a lot of folks have seen the images of these three options and discussion. I guess kind of the big picture takeaway a lot of people are getting are that we might not get a Ballard station, or we might not get all the way to West Seattle. We might lose a station or two. I feel like the attitude has been really doom or gloom. And I'm curious what each of you thinks of that. Like, is that warranted, or is there a chance that we're going to end up with something that we're still all excited about?
I'm certain we're not all going to be excited about it, but I mean, Ballard and West Seattle, come on, we've got to make that happen. Ryan knows a lot more about the nuts and bolts of it. I just say, as a whole region, a whole community, we have to have those crucial parts of our city represented. And Ballard has been waiting so long. And also, it'll probably piss off NIMBYs in Ballard too. So there's the added benefit of that.
Well, to that point, I think the NIMBYs already got their way in Ballard. They were able to score a tunnel, which is more expensive. And so it's ultimately kind of coming back to bite us a little bit. The fact that is more expensive and is becoming a little less feasible.
What would the alternative be? Like a bridge?
A bridge, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. I mean, I feel like that would be harder. I just assumed that we didn't even consider a bridge because it would either need to be very tall or would need to be a drawbridge, yeah?
Potentially. The I-5 bridge over the Columbia just got approval from the Coast Guard to build a fixed span bridge over a much more important waterway. So, yeah. But to answer your broader question, I kind of feel like I'm the optimist in the room on this whole question. Stepping back for a second and look at what's most likely to happen. We're going to advance light rail to Tacoma Dome, downtown Everett, and West Seattle, and build a second tunnel underneath downtown Seattle for light rail trains. Those four things are all likely to happen within a couple of years of each other and stay on track without losing any time. The question of getting to downtown Ballard is a real one and an important one. But we'll look at what happened in West Seattle when Sound Transit was able to take a $8 billion light rail line and take it down to 5 by advancing design, looking for cost-saving options, and figuring out how to do it cheaper. We haven't been able to do that for Ballard because the board has spent a couple of years meddling in the different alignment options and trying to figure out what is the most amenable to community concerns. And so we're at 30% design for West Seattle and only 15% for Ballard. And so if we're able to take that project and advance it, we're going to be able to find those cost savings. In addition to that, Sound Transit is also looking at financial options, including different tools. We are still trying to get the legislature to unlock these long-term bonds that could unlock $4 billion. And so I'm optimistic. There's also these projects that people are wary about falling through the cracks, like the Graham Street infill station in the Rainier Valley. We are talking about how to do that. We could be able to make that station happen with a new rental car tax, maybe not the entire amount, but tools like that could be able to get those projects across the finish line. So the board is really concerned about keeping everything that is in motion right now in motion.
It does seem silly to step back on something that's already got momentum moving forward. And I mean, that's kind of how I feel about this whole project, period, right? Like in this moment where the city is so actively excited and sees the fruits of all of that labor come into play here. It's like we actually have a functional new line that connects major parts of our region. I wonder if there's a way to capitalize on that public sentiment in some way as well. But I know one other way of raising funds for this traditionally is through federal funding. And is there any indication that we're going to get any federal funding for Sound Transit? And how much of that is up in the air given just the general federal funding situation right now?
I mean, it's all up in the air. Obviously, the Trump budget is not friendly to transit, but things change very quickly. What could happen if we can take control of Congress this year? Patty Murray was able to wrestle $1 billion or so out of the first Trump administration to get Linwood Link over the finish line. So, these things change very quickly.
I feel like what is happening at any given moment is always a question these days. Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's do our midweek medley of top headlines. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Also, leave us a little review. It's really helpful. And tell your friends about us. You can also get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. And you can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at CityCast Seattle, and you can watch full episodes of this show on YouTube. All right, we're back, and it's time for our midweek medley where we're going to run down a few headlines we haven't had an opportunity to talk about otherwise. Number 1, last month, Governor Bob Ferguson officially signed the millionaire's tax. KUOW now reports that a group called Let's Go Washington immediately filed a referendum to try and repeal the new law, but the law included a clause preventing a referendum. So now the group has filed a lawsuit alleging that that clause is illegal, and Washington's Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case. You guys, we couldn't have had a good thing for more than like 5 minutes.
We always knew there was going to be lawsuits.
It's true.
It's not even slightly a surprise. I think it's pretty funny that a bunch of people who are threatening to leave the state because they're going to be taxed a couple points is called Let's Go Washington, as in, let's go. We can't live here anymore. We're too persecuted.
It feels very Let's Go Brandon to me, but I looked up what Let's Go Washington is also working on, and that includes anti-trans initiatives and giving parents more rights to review student records and opt out of activities on behalf of their kids, as well as reviewing classroom materials.
This is the same group that lost 3 out of 4 initiatives 2 years ago.
And they're fronted by probably the least sympathetic person you could create in a lab, which is Brian Haywood, a hedge fund guy from California. Like, it does not exactly inspire local pride and independence.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you did a Mad Libs of things that at least Seattleites tend to bristle against, yeah, that's... All right. Moving on. Creature, the lovely consignment shop in Volunteer Park, just had a break-in, and they made an Instagram post announcing that they would be closed for the day after they discovered that break-in. They wrote in that post, "We know many other small businesses have been hit lately with similar thefts. It is getting more and more difficult to run a small business in Seattle, and this kind of thing is both demoralizing and financially debilitating. To our customers, all of Seattle's small businesses need you more than ever right now. Please support us however you can, be it shopping, telling a friend about us, or leaving a kind review." So I do want to shout out Creature. I was just there last week. I'm literally wearing the pair of pants that I bought there right now. They're a great shop, really lovely people, great curation. And I mean, I think they really are pointing to something that we're seeing more and more. Like, many of our favorite places have faced break-ins, and it seems tougher and tougher to try and pick up the pieces, especially if it happens multiple times.
This past decade has been just a meat grinder for small businesses. Hopefully with this mayor and an evolving city council, there will be more measures to address that. There was the B&O tax cut for small businesses that should help. And like, we certainly need to be, finding as many ways as possible. And it's not just, beloved clothing stores. It's like nightlife venues and such. People aren't drinking as much. People aren't going out as much, et cetera. So every small business owner I know is like, every day brings some fresh new hell.
Ryan, have you been seeing much of this?
Yeah. So here's what I think about this. And I know there was some other stories of break-ins happening in the Belltown area recently. It's wild to live in a city where we have some of the highest paid police officers in the nation, and people can't depend on the police to keep their businesses safe from break-ins. And I know that our officers will say they're stretched, but they're doing that at the same time that their contract keeps them meddling in mental health and overdose calls and doing things that are not their job. And I don't see a way forward if the police department isn't shamed into acknowledging that they are holding back the city when it comes to a broader public safety strategy around the care team and setting up a third-party response and actually being able to keep cops doing what is their job, which is preventing break-ins like this.
It does feel like a larger systemic issue that it seems like a lot of small businesses and their patrons are trying to solve on an individual basis. I guess kind of a middle ground to this, I will point out that our city does have some funds called Back to Business, where they give grants to businesses to either reimburse them for the cost of repair. So I believe they offer up to $3,000 or up to $6,000 to upgrade their security. But again, all of that feels very reactionary, which, of course is necessary. Break-ins will happen. But the root of the problem seems to be much deeper than that. And I mean, you all both touched on what that means and what that might look like. But all right. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that Dragonland is gone. Do you all know about Dragonland?
Yeah.
I did not know about it until today, and I'm like mourning the loss of it, even though I just found out about it.
Ryan, tell us what it is for folks who haven't heard of it.
Well, it's a vacant lot in Seward Park over by the Third Place Books. It kind of became a pop-up kind of art space and a neighborhood attraction, I guess you could say. But the property owner, there was a story in the Times that the property owner has kind of cleared that out and wants to move forward with, redeveloping their property that they own.
Yeah, he said, "We don't want to be art police. We don't want to sound like ogres." But it's sad that all of that guerrilla art has been cleaned out. It seems like what the owners are trying to do is find someone to buy it and or to develop a 32-unit townhouse project.
It sounds like this site has some restrictions around the stability of the soil. And so townhouses do seem like ultimately maybe the thing that's going to be able to pencil here. But to bring it back around to our first discussion on the comp plan, Seward Park, this area was actually supposed to be a neighborhood center. It was vetoed, pulled out of the comp plan by Bruce Harrell. Can't help but notice that would have been the neighborhood center that's closest to where he lives. And so we might have had more options for redevelopment if this parcel isn't particularly suitable for a new apartment building that could bring in businesses and amenities. You could have other options in the neighborhood. But right now, this is kind of a little bit of a unicorn that people really do want to see develop. And so it's kind of what I'm talking about with that flexibility. If you only have one site that really makes sense in a neighborhood, then you're putting all of your eggs in one basket and putting a lot of community hopes on one space. And it's a lot of pressure for one parcel to fulfill.
Yeah.
And once Mayor Wilson pedestrianizes that stretch of Lake Washington Boulevard, that is the nearest sort of center for all those people to come when it becomes like a citywide festival every day of utopian urbanism, which I truly believe it will.
And in that situation, we'll bring back a little stretch of that pedestrianized area for Dragonland, created by whoever feels moved to create something and throw it in
I think
there.
the artist behind Dragonland has never needed to ask for permission, so I think they'll just keep on rocking it.
Yeah, I hope to see their work elsewhere. And until then, goodbye to Dragonland. All right, that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Ryan Packer, thank you so much for joining us.
So happy to be here.
And Brett Hamil, thank you as always for joining us.
Save the trees.
I'm your host, Jane Sihu. And listeners, we want to hear from you. Send us your thoughts on the new comp plan. Send us your thoughts on what we should do with ST3. You can email us at seattle@citycast.fm, or you can leave us a voicemail or text us on the CityCast hotline at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.